the tell me about a time when types of questions. So what Claire just covered was, tell me about yourself. And this next section will form the, I guess, chunk of a lot of the interviews that you'll face. And you can use the same framework to answer your behaviorals for all your interviews. So there's a specific framework that we generally like to use. And it comes in 4 components, really. One is the headline, situation, and then finally action and result. And the percentages that you see next to the headings, they're referring to the time, the approximate percentage of time that you spend in your answer. So what do we exactly mean by headline, situation, action, and result? Essentially, headline really means, 1 to 2 summary of the story that you want to tell. Situation provides the scene setting for the story that you're going to tell. Action, what did you do and why did you do it? And finally, result, what was the final result? And you'll see that, there's a lot of similarities with the STAR framework. If some of you might have heard of it, it stands for situation, task, action, and result. And sometimes like reflection as another R at the end. And those are essentially, like, you don't need to worry. Those essentially are, one and the same. But what I like about this format is that the headline at the beginning, which forces you to remember that it's always very important to have this one-liner at the beginning of your answer. So what do we mean by headline? Essentially, you need, it's important to really summarize very quickly your answer to guide the interviewer on what you're gonna talk about for the rest of the 2 to 3 minutes in your answer. And it also helps to clarify, the contents. In case you misunderstand the question, it gives the interviewer an opportunity to step in and say, oh, actually, sorry, this is what I meant. So can you provide another story or example that answers my real question? Secondly, situation. It's very important to, build up that, the whole situation and explain how high the stakes were. So in order for the interviewer to understand that, the story that you're telling is very important, high stakes, and has significant implications for the company. And that will later help you to show that the impact that you made was indeed very substantial. The third component is action, which comprises 50% of the time. You really want to spend this time to talk about what you did to fix the crisis or situation. And also don't forget to also explain why you did it. And this why you did it is very important because you need to explain your rationale and demonstrate the logic and thought processes that went on in your mind in order to decide the appropriate course of action. And this gives you an opportunity to demonstrate your analytical skills. Also, a common mistake we want to highlight for this section is you need to avoid the use of the word we and instead use the word I, because your answers should really focus on what you personally did as opposed to the team in general. Another great tip is be me-see, and for those unfamiliar, it means mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. And this really helps you to understand, to make your entire, your answer very complete and to not miss out on anything. And it helps to guide the interviewer as well. And so examples would be if you're, listing out certain actions that you took and why you took them, you label them off. First, I did this. Second, I did that. Third, I did that. And another way of, applying structure would be looking at, external versus internal examples when you're referring to stakeholders, and reasons for doing certain things, and also quantitative versus qualitative, like factors that led you to decide a certain course of action. Lastly, result. That's you want to demonstrate that your actions made a really significant impact. And you should also call out the quantitative and the qualitative results. As an example, if your story is about you trying to improve, let's say, the number of sales leads for your company, then your quantitative results would be I increased my sales, my company's sales leads by X% in a month. And your qualitative results would be, this increased the motivation of my team. I also was, commended by my sales director for, taking the initiative, and that has been rolled out, in the company ever since. Another point to add, interviewers sometimes will, interrupt you in the middle of your answer. So don't be taken aback when they interrupt you, but you should have practiced to a point where you're very familiar with the content you're going to share, and that you can, you won't be fazed by those interruptions. Finally, a last point, bottom right of the chart, the table. This is the reflection part of the results, and it's great if you can include this if you have time in your approximately 3-minute sort of response. What exactly did you learn through the process? So, for example, through the process, I learned that perseverance and being consistent is really important. In order to not be fazed by the first time I failed at something. So it shows to the interviewer that you're very reflective and you're able to take feedback, which would vibe very well with them. So I'm going to show you a video which Tessa and Eswe have prepared and Claire actually. So it's of Jordan, their classmate at Yale, who is going to tell us about a time when he persuaded someone or others to do something they didn't want to do.
When I joined my previous firm, we were using an old legacy software system that was slow and inefficient. We all agreed that the system was frustrating and was causing client issues. So one meeting, a few of my colleagues and I spoke up, and we raised this issue with the partners and identified an opportunity to maybe move forward with moving to a new system. Unfortunately, this idea was pretty quickly dismissed. So a few of us decided that we as a group would try to convince the partners. We spoke with many other people in the office, most of whom were very close to the system, and put together a list of all of the pain points that the current system was causing. We also spoke with software vendors to get a sense for some of the potential cost savings of moving to a new system. We packaged all of these insights into a document and delivered it to the partner group. And sure enough, after a few weeks, they were convinced, which was really great. So we moved forward with the new system, and it was fantastic. It made people's lives easier, and overall was just a really good learning experience for me.
So I think Jordan left, his actions and his, the resolution of it, the ultimate impact of his actions very vague. He could have gone into more detail on what specifics he did, and also kind of said, and sure enough, a few weeks later they agreed. It's as though the situation solved itself without much effort from his side. So he should have definitely talked more about the efforts that he went through in order to make a difference. And yeah, overall it was pretty bland, I'd say. So having more emotions putting more emotions in his explanation would have made a huge difference. A second video of what Jordan's improvement was, and I'd love to get your feedback again on what went well this time.
I'd like to walk you through when I persuaded the partners of my previous firm to upgrade the firm's existing private equity software system. Shortly after joining my previous firm, I very quickly recognized that the existing PE software system was just completely outdated and almost entirely dysfunctional. The system was manual, it was incredibly clunky, it was difficult to use, and what this meant is that people spent weeks producing reports and documents that should have taken merely hours or minutes. Even worse was that these reports were often just full of errors and inaccuracies. This was both destroying employee morale, but more importantly, ruining relationships with some of our most important clients who were just fed up with receiving reports late or often full of errors. For these reasons, I knew that something had to change, and since I'd recently joined the firm, I felt actually quite well positioned to come in with some new ideas and hopefully make a big difference. For this reason, for the better part of a year, I worked hard to persuade the partners of the firm to agree to upgrade to a new system. When I first brought this idea up in one of the monthly partner meetings, it was very quickly dismissed. A new system would have been probably about 4 to 5 times the cost, and it was clear to me that the partners viewed this as a personal cost, not as an investment in the business. I realized through this experience that the pain points that were very much felt by the rest of the firm were just not felt by the partner group, and I did not see the financial benefits of upgrading. So I changed my tact and really did three things. The first is that I spent about 2 months meeting with other members of the organization who were closest to the existing system and compiled a laundry list of all the issues the current system was causing, both for us and for our clients. The second thing I did was that in an attempt to empathize with the partners' concerns around cost, I spent a lot of time researching and speaking with potential software providers to put together another list of what I viewed as the potential cost savings that could result from a new system. The third thing I did was to put together a formal presentation outlining what was really the business case for a new system and delivered it to the partner group. The partners took weeks to deliberate and there was a lot of back and forth, but ultimately they returned from one of their annual offsites with approval for me to lead a team internally that would evaluate a variety of new systems. Fast forward about 6 more months, and ultimately we moved forward with a new system called Alta Return that, when it went live, very quickly completely revolutionized the way that the firm was doing business. It made not only my job on the investment team so much more efficient, but it saved our back office on average about 20 hours per person per quarter just on client reporting, which was hugely meaningful for the firm at that time. This was a very rewarding experience, despite being very challenging at times and often requiring a lot of work late at night in addition to my regular investment role. It really had a massive impact on the organization. I was very grateful to be able to play a role in that. It also taught me 2 important lessons. The first is just you need perseverance when you're trying to convince others, particularly those who are more senior to you, and also that there is a tremendous amount of value in building a coalition of support, particularly when you're trying to drive organization-wide change.
I think he personally, just building on that, I think he really built up very well on the problem that he faced and how high stakes the situation was. You could even see it on his face, like his cringing at the problem. So I think it was really good that he brought in those emotions as well, and he brought the audience into his story, so you could really like feel for his pain, and I think that's super effective. He also gave a very clear and detailed elaboration. He mentioned I instead of we, so you definitely saw it like, comparing with the first and second video. In the second video, you could see he really took charge, right? He wasn't a passive like team member, and you could tell that this guy really takes responsibility and can lead a team of people to do something. And he, as I mentioned, emotions, he brought it in very well. And it's a lot more convincing if you actually bring those into your stories as well. And finally, wrapping the story up with those reflections. And it was nice that you could draw maybe a link to that he was someone who continuously learned, found like challenging work very rewarding, and so that adds a lot more opportunities to sell yourself in the interviews, not just by directly answering the question, but if you add your reflection points there, you can also give yourself more opportunities to tell the interviewer more about your other skills.